Good morning, happy Boxing Day. Welcome back to Breakfast on GB News with Cameron Walker and Pip Thompson. Now, Cameron.
Yes.
We know that you are a royal correspondent here on GB News, and something that, well, I don't know about you, but I love to do a quiz over Christmas, and there's loads of quizzes in the papers today. And this one is a memory game for 2023, and it's split into different topics, and there's a royals topic.
Let's see if I'm still royal correspondent by the end of the show.
Exactly, OK. Yeah. King Charles and Queen Camilla's two dogs, Beth and Bluebell, are what breed?
Jack Russells.
Correct.
Yay!
What nickname does Mike Tindall have for Prince William because of the future king's low alcohol tolerance?
Oh, 1 pint Willie or something like that? Yeah, OK, oh, good.
Well done. And finally, which actress plays Kate Middleton in season 6 of The Crown in which she meets William?
Do you know, I don't know her name, I'm afraid. She looks very much like Kate Middleton did in the early 2000s, but I have no idea what her name is, I'm afraid.
Meg Bellamy.
OK, I think 2 out of 3 is OK.
That's
because
all right.
2 are royal questions, and 1, I would argue, is actually showbiz, so it doesn't matter that I got it wrong.
There's still 8 left, so we'll come back to it.
Great. We've got the whole show to do the royal Christmas quiz. Good.
Let's take a look at some of the newspaper front pages.
Yeah, the Daily Mirror leads with King Charles being nicknamed the King of Peace after he calls for tolerance and respect between faith as thousands die in wars.
The Guardian leads with an exclusive report that says children are at risk of diabetes, heart disease and other serious health problems after ministers shelve anti-obesity policies until 2025.
The Daily Telegraph leads with the NHS being under fire after analysis shows menopausal women are 3 times more likely to be offered hormone treatments than others.
The Daily Express leads with top Tories insisting that interest rates must be slashed to give the economy a vital kickstart early next year.
The Eye are leading with the Tories facing a new threat for the next general election from Nigel Farage's party, Reform UK, as they continue to close the gap on the Conservatives. Well, joining us to go through some of the day's headlines is broadcaster Albie Amankona. Great to see you. And broadcaster Andrew Eborn. Good morning, Andrew.
Nice to see you.
Happy Boxing Day to you both. What should we start with, Albie? You take us through the first story.
Let's start with the King's speech, shall we? Because I think it was quite an important speech from the King yesterday. Really, I thought, hammered home the multi-faith society that we live in the United Kingdom. He made lots of references to all faiths. He made a reference to the Abrahamic family of religions, that, of course, being Judaism, Islam and Christianity. He also spoke about people with no faith. And I think that's particularly poignant at this time of year because, of course, we do see a lot of a war going on, of course, in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas. And that is really a pseudo-religious war between a Jewish state and an Islamic group.
What do you mean when you say pseudo-religious war?
Well, it is really a war between 2 different religions in the Middle East, between Israel and Hamas. You have the Muslim-led Hamas organisation, which people call a terrorist group, and, of course, the world's only Jewish state, Israel. So a lot of people call that not just a pseudo-religious war, but a religious war. And he was making the point yesterday that we are from an Abrahamic family of religions, and actually these religions that all come from a similar part of the world share lots of common features.
And it was still very much grounded in a Christian message, though. He kept referring to the Christmas story and the Nativity, but also helping others, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He spoke about the armed forces and people working throughout Christmas, like many broadcasters were, of course. But he was speaking about the forces and how they were involved in the coronation and really making a reference to all of the services that people provide each other just out of the goodness of our hearts.
Absolutely.
Okay. We will come back to the King's speech. It'll be interesting to see what the ratings were for it.
The one thing that was missing, which I always loved with the Queen, she used to have the photos of the family. Do you remember
Yeah,
that?
I noticed that.
And Harry was obviously not there. You had Fergie back in the fold, which I thought was glorious, although I have to say that the Mail's picture of her was probably not the most flattering. Fergie falling over is not really the best look, is it, for that particular side? But it was missing those family photos.
It felt quite, and I know people will disagree with me, but it felt quite businesslike for King Charles. Whereas I think when the Queen did her message, there was, like you say, because of the family photos,
warmth,
that she was
wasn't
normally
there?
seated. It was more sort of comforting, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, it was a different style. It was filmed in a room which we don't see very often, the centre room of Buckingham Palace, which opens out onto the
And it
iconic
hadn't been done
balcony.
from Buckingham Palace for a few years, had it?
No, it hadn't, because it was COVID and Queen Elizabeth was in Windsor Castle, and then, of course, the King wanted to pay tribute to his mother for his first Christmas message. But I think what was striking, OK, it didn't have family photographs, but it did have a real-life tree for the first time. As you can probably expect with King Charles, eco-friendly ornaments as well.
No, absolutely, and all credit to him on that sort of basis. And as he said, he wants to be the king of all faiths, even though head of the Christian Church, and that sort of side, quoting from the Bible, "Do unto others as you have done unto yourself." I think all that is a really, really good, positive message. But yes, there's an interesting backlash. I did think he missed the trick, and I think any father missing out on one son at Christmas is probably a sad.
The thing is, it might have been a bit distracting because people would have been looking at the telly thinking, is Harry there? Is Meghan there?
Put him there.
Is Archie
that
there?
was a golden opportunity to put everybody there.
But even if he did put Harry and Meghan there or didn't, and some family members were there and some weren't, it would, as you say, Pip, perhaps distract from the message of his Christmas speech. Overshadowing.
Andrew, what have you found?
Well, talking of interesting fragmented parties and relationships, the Tories, this is in the eye, the Tories facing a new general election threat from our Nigel's party, working on that sort of basis. So what's happening? They've failed to close the gap. That's what they're saying about the Conservatives, who are fighting on two fronts with the rise of Reform UK. And Reform UK, they've basically risen 9% in the polls, 9% over the very start of the year, where they sort of started on 6%. And this is an increased challenge. And I was talking to a number of the people. I mean, Richard Tice is obviously dances on this channel now, and David Ball, who I know very well as well, who's the deputy leader. And they are saying that we're not going to give up the votes, is what happened. They've all received a letter turning around and saying, no, a vote for reform is a vote for reform. But I do think they're going to possibly be the kingmakers on that sort of side. With those sort of percentages, it is a very interesting thing.
But our general election is a first-past-the-post system.
Yes.
So are they going to be able to get that number of votes over the line?
Yeah, I think this is the point they're sort of emphasising. They always say, look, it's not a wasted vote, because that's the standard narrative. They always say history repeats itself, because people don't learn the lessons from history. So you can predict what's going to happen with the narrative. They're going to say, oh, don't vote for them because it's a vote for there. You work on that sort of principle. The other thing we're going to see is a lot of the first election ever that we have AI front and centre. And, you know, my passion is about artificial intelligence and all these deep fake videos and so on and so forth. There's going to be loads and loads of those next year.
A vote for reform, let's be very clear, because of the first-past-the-post system is a vote for Labour. Anyone voting for reform is making it more likely that Labour will win the next general election. And we do just have to be honest about that. Of course, the Reform Party are going to say, oh, well, if we all just vote reform, reform will win the general election. But that's not going to happen. It will cause a Labour win.
And we don't know how involved yet Nigel Farage might be.
Yes, of course, and I'm sure if Nigel Farage does get back to frontline politics for the Reform Party, that's going to make them a lot stronger. But ultimately, we live in a two-party country, and first past the post makes it very difficult for third parties to actually get in power.
What do you think will turn them around? Because that's the interesting. We always talk about the silver bullet, where you're having this 80-seat majority not so many years ago, and they all say a week in politics is a long time. Within the next year, either in March or possibly October, they're going to do it, not in November because of the US election. What is going to be the silver bullet? We talk about taxes, we talk about immigration, we talk about the other bits and pieces, the 5 pledges. What will turn people around?
I think it really depends. You've got lots of people, and especially the government, making a lot of noise over this Stop the Boats policy. And I personally think the Stop the Boats pledge from Rishi Sunak was looking like a mistake if we actually look back. I think at the liaison committee last week, he actually refused to put a date on when he was going to be able to stop the boats. So it seems like an impossible task. But the Tories have really wedded themselves to this goal.
And also, the boats are
unachievable.
a fraction of the problem when it comes to immigration. And I do wonder whether on the doorstep people will say they're more concerned about the cost of living, how much money they've got in their pocket each month. That's a huge thing when we think about, you know, what's been happening with inflation, what's been happening with interest rates.
You're absolutely right. And what's interesting, people will think, oh, what is the one issue? It's not one issue. They're all interrelated. It's absolute cost of living. It's the cost of what's going to happen on inheritance, or the tax and so on and so forth. But they're all interrelated. Obviously, immigration has a knock-on effect for services which are here, but also the provision of those services, not just the cost.
OK.
Albie, let's have a look at this Guardian exclusive. Children in England at risk of diabetes, heart disease and other serious health problems because ministers have shelved anti-obesity
Measures. Yes.
Yeah.
So in 2020, the government commissioned a report, I believe, by Henry Dimbleby. So they were called the Dimbleby reforms. And he came up with this whole plan of how we were going to tackle childhood obesity, including things like banning online advertising, banning buy one get one free deals on junk food, having junk food advertisements happen after 9 p.m, for example, and a whole host of other measures. But because of pressure from parts of the Conservative Party, people saying that this was too much of a nanny state, the government has kicked these plans into the long grass. But actually, the facts don't change just because you kick the policies down the road. We're expecting that 2 in 5 children in England are going to be overweight by the time that they leave school. And there's some very interesting reporting on these topics. I always find quite frustrating, actually, this whole idea that it's only wealthy families who are able to sidestep retail environments and make good decisions. You know, it's not only wealthy people that can make good decisions about food. Anyone can decide to pick an apple over a packet of crisps, but they've just got to be given the information, the education to make better, healthy decisions.
But, Andrew, do you think there is, though, a link between obesity and families in more deprived areas?
Yeah, without doubt. And I think that's the reality. Some of these healthy foods are really quite expensive. And this is the problem. You go for your happy, miserable meal, whatever you want to try and do.
Yeah.
It's much cheaper to get that, and it's also easy for families. What we need to look at is the economics of the whole thing. As I say, it's all interrelated. So eating healthily should be good. The other thing, I'm a trustee of a charity, which the Queen is a patron of, called UK Harvest, which is all about educating people about food and about waste and so on and so forth, and excess food, and how you can do really useful things to make sure that people can actually afford decent meals.
How easy is it, though, to have all this healthy food, fruit, vegetables,
Yes.
A lot cheaper than perhaps junk food? Is it about education, or is it about fundamentally changing the way that food distribution happens in this country?
I think the answer is both. Like all these things, it's that sort of education. Start with the education. Say to people, let's do that big campaign. Eating an apple is great. And actually, it is very reasonable. You work on that sort of basis. And you look at the stats and how that's going to have a knock-on effect for people. I mean, in the days when I was growing up in school, they used to give you a little bit of milk, which you had with your bits and pieces to make sure you got your calcium and things like
I mean,
that.
Supermarkets have a lot of responsibility with this as well. When you look at the shelves, and often there's, you know, I don't know, if you've got your Tesco club card, you've got a reduced price on a massive family bag of crisps. You know, that's surely part of it too.
Well, of course, I mean, this is what the Dimbleby reforms were all about. He wanted to ban those buy one, get one free deals that you were just referencing to with the deals on packets of crisps. But I do also think there's a lot of dancing around this issue. We like to say it's about education. We like to say it's about buy one, get one free deals. We don't like to say to people, actually, you're making bad decisions. And I was looking up, just to do some research before, a bag of apples is not more expensive than a family packet of crisps. And ultimately, these are individuals making individual decisions, and we can't just say you can have all the education in the world, you can have all the bans in the world. Ultimately, you and I decide what we eat, and sometimes you've just got to say, make a better decision.
It's a vicious circle, though, isn't it? Because you get all this obesity, then that has a knock-on effects with the NHS as well.
No, absolutely, and I think that's why prevention is much better than cure. You work out why are there these pressures on the NHS. It's because we're eating not in a very healthy way. That's a really good start to look at that sort of side. So you're absolutely right. But again, it does go back to education, and part of the education is saying, well, a big bag of apples is cheaper than your Happy Meal, or other things are available. Work on that sort of principle. So I think make availability, make it cost-effective, but make sure that people understand the importance.
OK. Thank you for the moment, gentlemen. We will come back to you very shortly.